Many international journalists and influential bloggers want to see Russia's war in Ukraine with their own eyes. Luke Beasley is one of them. He's a political humorist and commentator with a multi-million audience. He came to Ukraine to show the world the reality of Russia's brutal war. The attacks caught him both on the front line and in Kyiv. Luke, thank you for being with us in the studio.
Thank you so much for having me, Natalie.
Luke, you know, this is your first trip to Ukraine, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so you just arrived from the front line.
Mm-hmm.
What was your impression? You spent there 2 days, as far as I know.
Mm-hmm.
No sleep, super loud, dangerous. What is your impression? Because at one of your latest video you posted on YouTube, you said, "I'll never be the same again."
Mm-hmm.
So what has changed in you dramatically?
Well, I think first, it is really easy to get numb to headlines and stories about this war and about horrific bloodshed in general. And I think that's happening for a lot of people in the United States, where they're sort of not feeling the emotions that are attached to the reality on the ground. That's a part of why I wanted to go. And so I guess better said, I'm never going to see it the same, right? I'm never going to detach and treat it just like a story, detached from the real human toll. And I mean, so yes, the last 2 days were pretty scary. And you're constantly wondering, as you're hearing all around you, is the next explosion going to be where you are? But I was there for 2 days, and people are there every single day. And so that's the other part of this. To have a total shift in my perspective about the reality, I think it's hard unless you're right in the middle of it to understand the reality of war. And when we say that this illegal invasion by Putin is horrific, that takes on a lot more meaning than ever before.
Russian propaganda is quite often saying that Ukrainian soldiers don't know what they are fighting for, which is quite ironic because that's the Russian soldiers who attacked neighboring country.
Yeah.
So they're not on their land. So we are protecting, they're attacking. How is that? What was your impression from the Ukrainian soldiers on the front line?
Yeah, that's such a great question. It's something that I posed to every soldier we got to talk to. We got to talk to numerous soldiers on the front lines, literally fighting. I mean, who knows better what they're fighting for than them? And I asked them that question, and there was different exact word choice, but the same meaning from every single one of them, independent of one another, which was, I'm fighting for my family, I'm fighting for our country, and the future of our independent country. And they have been face to face with what Russian occupation looks like. And some of them, we talked to one that we had to hide his identity because his family is in Russian occupied territory. And so if our interview was published without the blurred face and the distorted voice, then Russians would very likely find his family and kill them. And for him, it's as simple as, I'm literally trying to get Russians out of my home so I can see my family again. And that's the story we heard from each one of them. It's a fight for, yes, this more, zoomed out perception of Ukrainian independence, of course, but also so much more personally, literally the future and the fate of their families. And so I'm getting ready to go back to the United States. And I already get really upset seeing my fellow American commentators, sometimes, especially on the American right, perpetuate Russian propaganda. But I don't know how I'm gonna not freak out every time I hear that now, because I've heard it directly from them, and that stuff is just lies.
What is the main message you're gonna bring to the United States from Ukraine?
This is a fight, as I was told directly from soldiers, for the very principles that Americans are supposed to fight for. Multiple soldiers told me, we love what America stands for, at least what it's supposed to stand for, sometimes failing recently. And what we're fighting for here is exactly what America has fought for in the past. And so giving up on Ukraine as Americans would be giving up on the very pillars of what's supposed to make being an American an American.
You now witnessed how it's to live with next to Russia. You now witnessed how it's to live next to Russia. What shocked you the most regarding Russia's war in Ukraine?
The utter and complete inhumanity. Again, Americans and just people across the world, we see these stories. It's horrific. You kind of, you know that, you feel that, but then you move on with your day. And then there's this constant presence, and even Trump, our president, falls for or aligns with these talking points all too often that make it sound like what you referenced earlier. This is kind of just a dispute between a couple countries. They're both kind of caught up in it, and it takes two to tango, he'll say. And we don't really, maybe we just let them fight it out. Who's to say? And my hope is even the most Russian-aligned figures in America, if they saw what I just witnessed, would cut that out, because you realize the stories that I was hearing from soldiers and civilians, what Russia does whenever they not just invade, but then occupy. Some of it I don't really want to repeat, but just the most horrific treatment and killing of people that you can imagine. All for, not because they're being threatened at all, not because of any rational reason, but just Putin's expansionist, invasionist ambitions. And there, I think in America, or in world history, there's fewer simple in its morality conflicts about who is in the right and who's in the wrong.
Putin couldn't take Ukraine in 3 days, in more than 3 years of full-scale invasion. What do you think could make him to abandon the idea to conquer Ukraine? What steps from your perspective?
Destabilization in Russia. This is why it's so important that America steps up and puts every single bit of pressure possible economically on Russia, and then in military support to Ukraine, obviously, as well, because Putin has no regard for his own soldiers' lives. He'll just keep throwing bodies at this, and even failing over and over, like you said, as he has. A lot of people miss that. He has failed over and over to do what he set out to do. And so he'll keep that up until the threat of turmoil in his own country is bad enough to where the political risk of continuing this is worse than stopping it. And then he'll have to think of some fake reason about how he was successful in all this to deliver to his people. But there has to be a real change in the quality of life and in the stability economically, socially, and otherwise in Russia. It can't just be failures on the battleground here. It has to be impacting them closer to home so that he feels domestically threatened.
Yes. You know, the messages we hear from the United States here in Ukraine, quite different. Sometimes it feels like, well, what they're saying in the Oval Office, we have the impression that Washington is just drifting away. Mm-hmm. And then, just a month ago, I've heard from the Ukrainian deputies at the corridors. So they were saying that still the United States, the strongest ally of Ukraine. Mm-hmm. So from your perspective, behind every Trump's words, what are the real steps you see as an American of United States supporting Ukraine?
Mm-hmm. That they're currently taking, or that they should take?
Currently.
I mean, they are still supporting in different ways, but the problem is sort of twofold, which is there has been, because of I call it the MAGA right, the sort of Trump-aligned right wing in America, there have been really consequential delays in support, prevention of certain support, cutting off temporarily of intelligence, withholding certain defensive weapons that have been very real. And even within that context, maybe, as you said, you're hearing from people in Ukraine saying they're still one of our strongest supporters, which makes sense, as we should be, but that doesn't mean that we're doing enough, and it doesn't mean when we have taken our foot off of the gas pedal a little bit that it hasn't had catastrophic implications. So I think there's still a lot of support happening. I don't think Trump has abandoned completely, but the constant setting of deadlines that he's done for Putin, saying, in 10 days or in 20 days or by this date, I'm going to really do everything I can to support Ukraine. And that would be meaningful shifts in aid and then economic pressure on Russia, and then the date comes and it goes, and then this last time Trump was actually finally getting upset, and all it took was for Putin to have that Alaska summit with him, and then Trump came out again and said, all right, I'm going to give him a couple more weeks before I make a decision on more pressure. And that, as I said to you before, is the path to lasting peace. Trump, for some reason, gets a lot of credit for repeating the words, oh, we want peace, but if you don't actually do the right things that facilitate that, then your words are meaningless, and he hasn't done that in his delays and his prevention of some of the correct steps on this. So I think there's still a lot of support that's kind of ingrained in U.S. policy, but there have been, because of Trump's whims and his admiration of Putin that is just tragic and nauseating, there have been real hindrances to what I think a better leader would have done.
Yes, absolutely. With that, Trump's flattering to Putin, where does that lead?
Where's that lead? I mean, there is a real ideological strand of the American right that believes that the path towards U.S. prosperity is not aligned with our historical allies and is just aligned with other, regardless of how much they align with our principles, superpowers like Russia. And that's what's something that's really heartbreaking for me as an American who grew up really patriotic, and I still am patriotic and I love my country. Seeing a big part of my country run away from what I thought were the pillars, as I said earlier, that makes America unique and is supposed to make us stand for something special on the world stage. And I think they see, hey, if we can exert the type of power and align with the type of power that dictators abroad like Putin do, then why wouldn't we? And I think some of them are starting to see that their brand of politics in the U.S. is slowly getting harder and harder to win in a democratic system. And so there is really, as dark as this sounds, an authoritarian version, not of all of the right or the Republican Party, but a chunk of it that thinks we should model our government more after those authoritarian regimes than our current liberal democracy. And that's one of the things that motivated me a lot to do what I do, which is to push back against that, because I think if that happens in the U.S., the whole world is worse off.
During the meeting in the Oval Office in Washington, the meeting of Ukrainian president with Donald Trump and the European leaders, Volodymyr Zelensky more than 10 times said thank you. And I was watching your video when you were like, because it feels like it's just a lot of pressure on the Ukrainian president just to do that. So do you think that actually helped?
Yeah, well, first let me say to your viewers, to anyone who is understanding the importance of supporting Ukraine and to Ukrainians, I personally, as an American, am really sorry for the behavior of our president. It has made me so infuriated, understanding the power and the consequences of his actions, that his bizarre childlike admiration of Putin caused the first Oval Office meeting. And there's a complete detachment for a lot of Americans from the values that I hold really dear, but I do want you to know a lot of America, I would say the majority of Americans, were horrified by that first Oval Office meeting, and we see the faults, and we're going to punish Trump electorally, hopefully come the midterm elections. But that's not something the U.S. president should have shown on the world stage. And then that was his first meeting with Zelensky. His first meeting in this term with Putin was a red carpet. And that contrast disgusts me. It disgusts me as an American, disgusts me just as a member of this world. And I really apologize to Ukrainians for that. Now, because of that meeting, Zelensky realized, oh, okay, so Putin can constantly be massacring people, and all it takes for Trump to like him is if he does a fun photo op with him, says, oh yeah, the 2020 election was stolen, you're so right, yes, you're amazing, get it. And so Zelensky went, okay, well, if it's in the interest of my country, which it is, for the United States to be supportive of Ukraine, then he'll do what it takes. And what it took was saying thank you 100 times and being super, super polite to Trump and wearing an outfit that was more suit-ish, because that was apparently something people cared about. Insane. And it was the right call, but it was nauseating to watch that he felt the need to do that. And that it's that immaturity of Trump that requires that behavior to win him over.
You know, the question that from time to time is raising in your society, in Ukrainian society, is impeachment. Do you really think it's kind of possible? Why I'm asking that? Because I remember just not a long time ago, when United States made its strikes on Iran bases, I've heard from some congressmen saying, we need an impeachment, we are done. And after Russian dictator and killer, terrorist coming to American soil and walking on the red carpet and shaking hands to the American president, nobody seems feel like terrified and angry. Maybe some, yes, but I'm talking about the Congress.
Yeah.
Do you feel that it's actually possible, or it's just super naive to think that it's even a discussable question?
Okay, well, two thoughts on that. First, I agree with you that it was so weird to watch us just go, all right, well, they had that meeting, that was weird, and move on. In America, I think they're just so numb to this type of stuff from Trump. So you're right, there wasn't the outrage that you would imagine if any other president did that and handled the meeting the way that Trump did. Some of my viewers and followers aren't going to like this response to the main part of your question. I would not hold your breath for an impeachment of Trump. Now, the good thing is come, November 2026, there's going to be an opportunity to take away a lot of his power by, Democrats hopefully sweeping the midterms for the House and Senate. But even so, in the Senate, you would need a super majority, and that's not going to happen. And Republicans are not going to ever betray Trump in large enough numbers. And so I don't like people, as much as it works on social media and stuff, who capitalize off of false hope. And I think giving people the false hope that Trump's going to be impeached and convicted and taken out of office before the end of his term is unrealistic. And we've seen that movie before. And I think there's just about anything Trump could do that Republicans would let him get away with. And so I think the priority and the hope that we should feel is kneecapping his administration in many ways by Congress actually wielding the power that it has, because Republicans have just given a blank check to Trump to do anything. And Democrats, if they had a majority in the House and Senate, could restrict a lot of that, but not impeachment. And then just whoever Trump's successor is, obviously he's doing the weird thing where he's saying, maybe I'll run for a third term. I don't think that's going to happen. And his successor needs to be defeated. Otherwise, we're going to keep dealing with this ideological problem in the Republican Party. But no, I don't think the path is impeachment, as much as I wish that it were.
Yeah, another controversial idea. Do you think Putin has some dirt on Trump?
I try to deal in evidence, and I've never seen credible evidence that he does. So as much as, again, his behavior would, like if you were to say, describe a US president who the Russian dictator had dirt on, you would describe all the stuff that Trump does. So I understand why people wonder that for sure. But I haven't seen compelling evidence. Doesn't mean it's not there, but I couldn't assert that.
Yeah, absolutely, because it seems like Donald Trump doesn't care about any dirt that people have on him, but still it somehow was such a big issue and everybody was talking about Epstein files and everything.
And
so
that's what's so disturbing, is that if Putin did have dirt and he released it, I don't think it would change Trump's support, which is horrific. I mean, there's audio of him saying the worst things. He was found liable in a civil trial for sexual abuse. All of the dirt that's normally on people is all public, and still he has the support that he does, which is tragic.
Yeah, and actually, final one. Trump has been in power for the second time for more than 200 days so far. And I've just opened the article where Americans themselves are asking, are they living in autocracy? It was just the name of the article. Probably I will put it here on the screen.
Okay.
So what is your perception of that? Do you feel it that way, or how do you see it?
I would say a lot of the democratic principles that defined America have deteriorated in many ways, but not in an unreversible fashion, and not, obviously we're talking about a spectrum between autocracy and democracy. I saw some study that studies this, and it's, in this upcoming year, if things continue, we will go down a couple rungs. So we're definitely shifting in that direction. Now, a full-blown autocracy? No, I mean, we're talking about a little bit definitional questions, but definitely core democratic principles have been degraded. And I really worry if Trump's brand, it doesn't have to be him, but his brand of politics, if it's not taken out of power in this next presidential
Oh,
election,
that's a good one. That's a good point.
then we're really looking at a 5-alarm fire.
Do you see any of this is coming, that this brand will hold for a long time? I mean,
I am an optimist, so no. I think people, especially because he's doing the scary part of American politics that I've learned, I understand it, but sometimes drives me crazy, is there can be a lot that someone like Trump does wrong, but if it doesn't impact people economically, then they're fine with it, which is why Trump got back into power, even as people forgot the damage he did in mishandling the pandemic. But this go-round, he's really making some horrible economic decisions. And I think that and him pushing up prices with his tariff policy and his endless trade wars, I think that is going to be the nail in his political coffin and will cause a swing in the other direction. Now, will that type of politics immediately go away? No. But my hope is that we slowly push it out of relevance through continued defeats. But again, that's optimistic.
Yeah, you know, when I was for the first time in the United States, that was the election process, and there was Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump.
Wow.
And I remember that I was traveling all around the United States. There was some program, and I was traveling, and I visited 11 states, I guess. And we were talking as a journalist to people, asking what they want to change in the United States and for whom they're going to vote. Nobody said it's going to be Trump, well, except Florida. So basically, yeah. And what a surprise when I was going back home, he won the elections. And I like, okay. And I was in the flight with the Americans, and they were like, oh, we're so sick and tired of the system we had, medicine we had. And then they just appeared and becoming to speak loud. So that was my observation, that, you know, somehow people were hiding their true intentions, but then they were kind of I don't know, free to speak. Totally,
yeah. No, that's exactly the phenomenon. You nailed it. It was a little bit of guilt, a recognition that maybe he wasn't so great, but they still ended up voting for him. And then as the years progressed, they got more and more loud and proud about their views. But I mean, I would rather you be transparent about your views than hide them, because, yeah, that was a huge surprise. Now, why we chose to, after we saw his first term, re-elect him, there are reasons like pandemic conditions causing people to be upset with the incumbent party, but it was discombobulating.
Yeah, absolutely. Luke, it's a huge honor for me to talk with you, and I really hope that you're going to bring your true messages about Russia's war in Ukraine. I really appreciate for that.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this. Thank you.
Thank you.